Hello YouTube and welcome to Jungian Psychology 101. My name is Rickard Jansson and I just finished my second year in my psychology master's program. And on Monday I'm starting a 10-week course in Jungian Psychology and I want to bring you with me. The course is in Gävle and it's a free summer course. Well, not free, independent of any program. I'm going to talk about what the course contains, but I don't want to, give any spoilers. I don't know if I'm even allowed to, share that too much. But I have read and studied a lot of Jung, and, I'm no expert, but I want you to learn with me. And basically, I can still talk about, of course, what I read and what I learn, even though I might not be able to share, sort of the curriculum, if you think of it like that. I have read about 8 books of Jung at this point, spanning over 2 years perhaps. I find him extremely fascinating and his ideas extremely fascinating, which is why I'm taking this voluntary course instead of working this summer. I believe he was an absolute genius, and I believe Jungian psychology needs to make a comeback. So, what the course contains and what I know are these things. So you have individuation, which is, the process of becoming whole and free. I don't know. I'm going to talk about some things and, maybe you understand them and maybe you don't. But if you don't, it's okay. It will make sense in the end. Basically, what he was talking about here is that we are not free until we get rid of our sort of super ego. And our inner voices that we have gotten from experience and operant conditioning and stuff like that, or at least identifying where these voices and this programming, you might call it, where it comes from. But also ridding ourselves or healing ourselves of past traumas or things that control our mind and our actions. So that is part of the individuation process. Shadow work, which is something that's beginning to make a comeback, or maybe it was never gone, but a lot of people know about shadow work. And when they talk about it, they often talk about it in the individuation sense, that the shadow is the shadow that is behind the mask of the superego, or whatever role you're playing, or your complexes or stuff like that. But when Jung originally talked about the shadow, it was in relations to functions, these functions that were or are extroversion, introversion, thinking, feeling, and sensing and intuition. And here's the problem, right? These words have been co-opted by later personality psychology and are used to describe things that is not the same as Jungian psychology, because he saw these as binary functions and not, personality traits. So thinking / feeling is more like using your left or your right hand. It's not a gradual scale, it's a binary function. And I'm going to talk more about this later. Of course, it's a huge thing and very, very important. But if you only use one side, then the other side will be neglected, weak, and bad. So if you always use thoughts and thinking and rationale as your judgment, or your how you make decisions, then your ability to make decisions based on emotions or in areas where this is required will be severely hampered. and this will cause a lot of problems. An interesting association you can make with this is people that are autistic-ish. I'm not going to say autistic, but because I'm not qualified to make that statement. But imagine people like Sheldon Cooper from The Big Bang Theory, who is an amazing thinker and uses thought and rationale to solve all of his problems and make all of his decisions. But he is very emotionally unstable. And that is an example of someone whose feeling function has been in the shadow and underdeveloped. Then the course is about archetypes, which, I don't know a whole lot about. I haven't really dared to plunge into archetypes or symbols because I felt that, man, this is a deeper ocean that I am prepared to enter into. But now I am, and I've looked into it a little bit, and it's just absolutely fascinating. It is just chef's kiss. Mwah. So, what are archetypes? I'm not quite sure. Meta symbols of some sort. You have the archetype of the hero, the shadow, I think, unless the shadow is a symbol, the anima, the mother, the father, something like that. Maybe they are meta symbols, but what is that? I don't know. We're going to find out. And then, of course, we have, myths, symbols, rituals, and what are the psychological meaning of these things? What does it mean in our psyche to get baptized, to get married? What does marriage mean? What does it stand for? And myths. You have all these stories of Achilles, and I'm so bad at myths, and I can't wait to learn more about them. And of course, you have symbols. I'm going to talk about that a little bit more. So I'm not, much of an expert on these things, but I will be, I promise. I'm going to teach you, and we're going to have a great time. The course also contains psychological history, idea history, and religious history, which is very important in Jungian psychology in order to understand these, myths and symbols and rituals. Psychological history, I believe that my knowledge is about 7 out of 10. Pretty good, actually. I've been studying a lot of psychological history in the last 2 years independently, and but it's going to be, I love that subject, so I'm very glad I get the opportunity to raise it from a 7 out of 10 to perhaps, an 8 or a 9 out of 10. Idea history, I'm not as good at. I would say 3 out of 10. And that is because it's just too much, too confusing. And for me to take a course like this and sort of being semi-forced to take a bite is just a fantastic opportunity. I love that, because as it is now, it is, I don't know even where to begin. And then we have religious history, and that is basically the same. It's a 1 out of 10 for me, super bad. And then we have the Anima and the Animus by Emma Jung, Carl Jung's wife, who is, by the way, right there on the display poster. Not Emma, but Carl. And I don't know anything about the Anima and the Animus, but the little that I've, just looked at it super quick before making this video, it is super fascinating. And from what I understand, it's about the feminine and masculine spirit, what that is, what that means. And I think, honestly, it seems like it is a preface, or the beginning of modern gender theory, I guess, or something like that. But I trust that with Emma, as well as, because I know this is true with Carl Jung, it's just infinitely more brilliant than, the modern stuff. So let's move on to my takes so far on Jung and Jungian psychology. My takes on Jungian psychology is that, first of all, it's brilliant, but there's so much symbolism, and it's a completely different, view on what is real, what is relevant, and what is true, and stuff like that. When thinking about words, I could, say a word, and you will get an image of something, perhaps, or at least an understanding of that word. So if I say pen, you will have, an idea of what I'm talking about. And what is that idea, really? It's sort of a collection of knowledge and experience and, purpose and stuff like that. And what, if you ask 100 people to think of a pen, will they think of, a pen like this? Or will they think of, those orange wooden pens? And for some of my understanding of the symbols and archetypes, I think an archetype of a pen would be that pen that is the most commonality of, those thoughts. So this is probably not an archetype of a pen. It's probably that orange one. And, when thinking, if we use the word bird, I don't think the penguin is the most bird-ish when talking about symbols. I think that is some other bird. And that's just words. Now imagine symbols and how just intrinsic the associations must be. They say that one picture paints 1,000 words or something like that. And, a cross, of course, has so many more associations and underlying, I don't even know what to call it. You get what I mean. And what is that, if not sort of communication in the same way that words are, but more efficient? Because in dreams only use images and symbols, almost always, certainly. And that is so rich in a way, because, the concrete and the tangible of the world, numbers, facts, they are only the tip of the iceberg when talking about everything there is to know. Even if you would, measure me in every possible metric, compared to all of my memories, all of my relationships, all of, every interaction, and sort of the subjective soft values that is me and that I'm surrounded by, is so much more than the concrete. And that is a very big focus in Jungian psychology. And I find that to be absolutely delightful, actually, because it just makes it infinite. You could, spend your entire life doing Jungian psychology, and you will never get to the end, which means it's for someone like me that really likes to master things, it gives me the opportunity to really get something of a challenge. There is sort of, at least, I've only read the original Jung, and there seems to be an indifference to science, because he would, have his clinical practice, and he would, only go by what he experienced. So if something worked, it worked. there was no opportunity or ability to make it into a scientific experiment, or even if the science showed opposite, it didn't seem like he cared. But not in a nonchalant way, because he really, really, really cared for his patients. One of the quotes I remember by him is that you can stick to sort of a faulty idea for however long you want, but you cannot stick to a faulty method in clinical practice for any time at all. So, he trusted himself more than science, I guess. Individuation is what we talked about earlier, becoming whole and becoming free from, everything that is inside and outside of you, becoming a free individual, becoming your true self. Super fascinating idea. Gonna probably spend an entire video talking about it. Jungian psychology, and by the way, this is just my take, so if he's not indifferent to science, then my bad. Jungian psychology has a complete view and more. So, when talking about different schools of psychology, one of the famous pictures is, all of the schools touching an elephant and trying to say what it is. Jungian psychology is a complete view. It is not a particular school in that manner. Now, other, schools might make that claim, but this is not just me being a fan. His psychology encompasses all other parts of psychology, and that is just a fact. Haters gonna hate, but it's true. It's just that he described everything in a symbolic manner, and some theories and some schools have this sort of dry scientific manner of viewing psychology, and there's nothing wrong with that, but a lot of them are just saying the same things he already said a long time ago, but he talks about it in a completely different manner. And lastly, I want to talk about one of his specific ideas that I really enjoyed, and that is about how your functions, talking about these functions earlier, thinking and feeling, will affect your focus and behavior, and therefore outcome, and then how they will reinforce themselves. So let's get to it. So the original 3 pairs of functions are extroversion, introversion, thinking, feeling, and sensing, intuition. And of course, these will affect your behavior and outcomes, and therefore reinforce themselves. I say of course, not like I read it and was like, oh my god, this is brilliant. Let's say you are an overly introverted person. This will make it so that you will do activities that are solo. You will avoid people. And then, of course, you won't meet people, and you will be alone, and you will introspect and become more and more comfortable being alone, but also perhaps antisocial and not very skilled at making small talk or discussing anything at all, which will make you more lonely, and then more introverted, and more lonely, more introverted. One of Jung's own examples is one that we're going to go through, that is not one of the original functions. And he said that a heavyweight boxer does not have to use his verbal or rational debating skills to solve an issue, because the heavyweight boxer will either just punch his way to a solution, or don't even have to do that. And that, of course, means that he will never get any practice in using his verbal, debate skills. And then he will never use them, because we always use our most developed function, not always, but we prefer to use it because we're better at it and we're used to it. There are exceptions, because sometimes we either use our worst function for some reason that I don't know yet, but perhaps, sometimes, of course, because we don't have a choice. And it can also take over. That is the problem of the shadow, that your underdeveloped function, which is, a shadow in the shadow, will sometimes burst out and take control over your actions, and you won't be able to stop it for various reasons. So let's talk about this heavyweight boxer. Let's say he is not only a physical guy, but he is also a thinking guy. So he's rational, he's physical, he's big, and he's strong. He doesn't know how to communicate properly. And he never processes his emotions. He's a stoic, he's a tough guy. Think of, a criminal guy, a dangerous guy. These people are very often very snappy emotionally. If you disrespect them, just immediate violence, and they are very emotional. And that is because their feeling self, their shadow, pops out because it is so underdeveloped that it is like a child's, because they don't, they shut down their feelings all the time. They don't process their feelings, and therefore they have no skill in doing so, which means that whenever there's a slight, spark in them, it's just immediate gasoline and fire. Whereas someone who has processed a lot of feelings will, of course, be much more of an expert in this manner, and will very easily process any other feelings, of course. The problem, of course, with this is that it will affect your outcome, and then it will affect your environment, and then it will reinforce this. So let's say you are a tough criminal and you act this way, and you become violent, and then perhaps you go to prison, or perhaps you become, a mafia boss and, successfully manage your way to an outcome. Then that environment will more and more reinforce that behavior, because now all of a sudden you are forced to keep doing what you're doing, and even less so, tap into your feelings. And that is the first episode of Jungian Psychology. My plan is to do 1 a week each Friday for these 10 weeks, and I hope you will join me, and we'll have a great time learning together. Have a great day, everyone, and please like and subscribe.